there, welcome to Better Spaces, and I'm Jennifer Wisdom with Global Women for Women, and we partner with Better Spaces to create programs to help you connect, create, and conform, connect, create, and perform, there we go, at your highest potential. And you can ask questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can just shout it out. We have a small group today, so happy to answer any questions you have. And I love this topic. If you were here last time, you heard me talk about the different generations, and I'm going to go a step further today and talk about how we can work together in the workplace. So let me get started. A little bit about me. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I'm also a board certified business and organizational psychologist, and I love doing this work. This is what I do. I work with organizations about millennials and intergenerational communication to help them be more successful and to help them retain good employees, especially millennial and Gen Z employees. And then I also am the editor and publisher of the Millennials Guide series, which includes Millennials Guide to Management and Leadership and Millennials Guide to Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and many more. So I stay busy and I love working with and talking about and talking to millennials. So I went into great detail about this last time. So check that one out if you want more information. This is a kind of the 5 generations that are in the workplace right now: the traditionalist, which are the oldest group, the baby boomers, Gen X, which is my generation right in the middle, millennials who are currently about 20 to 40 years old right now, and then Gen Z who are under 20 and under, more or less. So these are the generations that are in the workforce, and some of the experiences that they had and some of the technological innovations that they experienced in their coming of age time that influenced how they think and how they feel and what their values are. And then I went through these applications to the workplace. Again, I went into this in greater detail last time, but kind of how things are set up between these generations to sometimes create some friction. So for example, that baby boomers tend to expect some degree of deference to their opinions, and millennials and Gen Z expect that respect needs to be earned, and they have little fear of power. So that sets us all up for some conflict in the workforce, in part because we have these different values and expectations of what other people are bringing to the workplace. So now I'm going to go a little bit further and talk about kind of some of the recent research on millennials and how they respond in the workplace. And then I'll talk about what we can do as individuals and what workplaces can do to help promote intergenerational peace. Is that the right word? Intergenerational peace in the workplace, or at least productivity and people getting along. So for views of authority, millennials are a challenge to traditional leadership. And even though I'm a Gen Xer, I love that. They challenge stuff, which is awesome. I think that's really fabulous, but not everyone thinks that's fabulous. Certainly traditional leaders don't necessarily think it's exciting and fun, but I do. Millennials are less interested in money or legacy or hierarchy, which are concepts that have really motivated the older generation. So this is a place where there's another difference in what millennials are motivated by, and they're much more interested in making a positive difference. So you can imagine if there's millennials in a workplace where everyone's focused on money, legacy, and hierarchy, and they're saying, I just want to do good stuff, that's going to create some friction there. Millennials are not impressed by authority, by your age or your experience. It's really much more of a, what have you done for me lately? And I just put Janet Jackson in there just as an homage for all the Gen Xers out there. And the conclusion around how millennials view authority is that they want to be leaders that make a difference. They want their leaders to make a difference. They want to be leaders that make a difference. And they want support so they can figure out how to be these great leaders and how they can take on the best aspects of authority, which is usually the enemy, but kind of take on those best aspects to use that power to do good. And they want help. So when you think about communication styles, millennials want things open. They want direct, mentor-like, friendly communication. This is part of how millennials were raised. That's obviously quite different from how baby boomers and traditionalists were raised. Millennials tend to work well in team settings, and they love everybody talking to each other and having a lot of conversations about everything. And of course, they understand communication technology. So again, you can imagine some friction here with some of the older generations where they are not as used to and maybe not as comfortable with a lot of open communication. And millennials just want to think of it like CNN, constant updates. I want to know what's happening. I want feedback. I want to know what's going on. So millennials have significant communication strengths. I mean, I think it's fabulous that millennials are bringing in, kind of ushering in this whole era of more open communication. However, they may communicate differently. That can create some friction. So less hierarchical and much more open and much more kind of higher volume of communication, which can create some challenges in workplaces. Relational expectations. So millennials want leaders who lead by example. They want people to be friendly and motivating and encouraging. So this is different from older individuals' perspectives of what they expect from relationships in the workplace, which is much more focused on, I expect my boss will tell me what to do and not fire me and give me feedback every now and then. Millennials want a much more of a closer relationship with their bosses. So you can imagine a millennial in a workplace who has a baby boomer boss. The millennial wants more of a relationship, and the baby boomer can't figure out why they want to talk to them all the time and why they want that kind of relationship, and they're less comfortable with that. So millennials, when they're leaders, they focused on much more on the social aspect of work. They want friendly coworkers. They want an interesting work environment. They want things to be fun and entertaining, and also something where they can get along with everybody. And in many workplaces, that creates some friction because there's always decisions to be made and things that happen, and people don't always get along. So that can be stressful for millennials when that's not the case. And then millennials also have this stronger team orientation that we talked about. So they may struggle with some of these difficult decisions as leader versus peer. So when you're thinking about millennials moving into leadership roles, which absolutely they are, they're at the right age, they're moving into these roles, that transition from being one of the gang to being the boss is often quite challenging for everybody, but especially for millennials, because they're so integrated with being one of the gang. And then in addition, once they become leaders and kind of manage that transition, they still may have trouble with making those hard decisions because they really value the social needs. They want that peer bond. And it's hard to be the boss sometimes when you have to make decisions that people don't like or that make people unhappy with you. So that can be a challenge in the workplace. And I talked a little bit about work motivation already, just to provide a little more context from recent research. Millennials are motivated by purpose, meaningful work, belonging, collaboration, flexibility, inventiveness. They definitely will not do things the way we've always done it. And I would say Gen Xers don't like that either. Millennials are taking it to a new level of basically, I want to understand. Just saying because I said so or because we've always done it this way does not work for millennials. Millennials also tend to feel they're underemployed and that they're essentially underappreciated, which totally makes sense because they have more education, more tech savvy, and better global mindset than any previous generation. And they do tend to be underemployed. So that, of course, opens up some opportunities for conflict where baby boomers or older generations may say, oh, you need to pay your dues, you need to put in the time, and millennials may already understand what's happening, or they may be confident in a way that makes the baby boomers say, reflect, when I was 2 years out of my bachelor's degree, I wasn't that confident, or I didn't know these things, and kind of sets up a lot of conflict in there. So they want to feel purposeful and valued and part of a team, which often it's important to intentionally cultivate. So then when we think of millennials as leaders, of actually being the leaders, they really value competence and determination, and they want this inclusive management style. They also emphasize immediate feedback. I mentioned that last time as well, where millennials want this back and forth. Again, CNN, constant updates. I'm reflecting that I'm a Gen Xer because CNN is so Gen X. But they really want immediate feedback, constant updates. They want to know what's happening. Another place where I think millennials are great. And there's also some challenges is that millennials demonstrate higher self-esteem, higher assertiveness, and they tend to be very confident. So yay for them. I'm glad that they're feeling good and they're assertive and they're confident. And there's some challenges in there in that they may present as more assertive and confident than they actually are. They may present as overconfident or maybe overly assertive given their understanding of what's happening. And then in addition, that presentation of high self-esteem and assertiveness and confidence, as helpful as it can be for them, sometimes that means it's harder to get the feedback and the mentoring that you're actually looking for. So then that creates some challenges where baby boomers or Gen Xers will see a millennial who has potential and who's rising up and see that this person's very confident and they're very assertive and what do they need me for? They don't need mentoring. They seem to know it all. So I don't need to be there. So that can create a challenge with millennials. In addition, millennials are really stressed, especially during the pandemic, and they are demonstrating, some of the research shows, higher rates of anxiety and depression and substance use than some previous generations. At the same time, they tend to talk about it as stressed rather than a mental illness or depression or anxiety. The good part is that millennials do tend to be quite open around mental illness and therapy and medication for for mental health issues. So that's positive as well. Not everyone in the workplace is that open and accepting. So that could be a challenge if millennials are wanting to talk about what they're experiencing and they're stressed. That can be perceived by older generations as complaining or as overly disclosing or as being inappropriate in the workplace. So again, lots of opportunities for conflict here and lots of opportunities to work together. So millennials value this competence and inclusion, and they would definitely benefit, most millennials that I work with benefit from mentoring and support to help them manage their stress and manage their leadership responsibilities. And that's a tough place to be, especially as an early leader. I work with a lot of early leaders and emerging leaders around how to stay focused on doing the right thing, on making sure that your people that report to you are taken care of, making sure that you're promoting your career, getting the job done, being conscientious, and not stressing out about all that stuff. That's hard. It's hard to learn anyway, much less during a pandemic and when you have, older generations breathing down your neck and judging you. So I have some thoughts about what organizations can do to support millennial leaders, and then I'll move into what we can do as individuals in a workplace. So for organizations, rather than accepting turnover as inevitable, I recommend shifting the organizational culture to utilize millennial talent effectively. And this can actually increase job loyalty, and it can improve the workplace for everyone, not just millennials. So some of these aspects that organizations can do are addressing employee needs, such as framing options as growth opportunities rather than as you need to pay your dues. And some of this is kind of structurally and infrastructure related for the organization about how they set up jobs and job descriptions and things like that. Other parts are how managers are trained to talk to their employees. Instead of saying, I paid my dues, you need to pay your dues, here's grunt work or whatever, that there might be ways to frame that and to understand it and to communicate it as an opportunity to get good at doing things or to get better at doing certain things or whatever. There's also diversity and inclusion. Millennials and Gen Xers expect diversity and inclusion, and they are often baffled when it is not there. So organizations can continue to step up. I know many organizations are making strides in these areas, not just the diversity of making sure the workforce has people who are different colors and from different countries or speak different languages, not just that, but especially the inclusion part that says, not only do we have this, we welcome this, and we welcome different ideas, and we welcome people with different perspectives. That's really important. And whether it's race and ethnicity, LGBT differences, country of origin, immigration status, like all these different options of how organizations can have diversity, that diversity of thought and the intentional inclusion of people who are different from each other can help build stronger workplaces, and bonus, increases job loyalty for millennials. Sustainability, so organizations can focus on kind of what they do that's good for the environment, for positive political activity, for things like that, not getting too political, but kind of promoting diversity and inclusion and safety of all individuals, the blanking on the word here, dignity, there we go, dignity of all individuals. Those kinds of things can really keep millennials engaged with the organization because they want to see that in their organization. 20 years ago, 40 years ago, nobody ever thought about this. They didn't talk about what causes their organization donated to, or kind of how they supported the environment. Like, people just didn't talk about that stuff. Now millennials need to hear it, and millennials are starting to be the majority of the workforce. So organizations should pay attention to that stuff. Mentoring on leadership practices is also really important. And this is for the current leaders on how to manage things, and on working with millennials on how to become leaders. And then just in general, part of my psychologist is showing here, promoting relational and emotional literacy. Like, how can people get along? How can people understand what's happening with each other in the workplace? Not to turn workplaces into therapy. Nobody wants that. But it is working with people to help them operate as individuals. We don't need to operate as an assembly line all the time. And I think operating as an assembly line might have worked in the past, but that kind of mechanistic approach to individuals in the workplace doesn't work well with millennials, and it doesn't work well moving forward. Okay, so individuals, I promised some individual recommendations. So if you are a baby boomer or Gen Xer, here are some recommendations for communicating with millennials. So the first one is delete your negative attitude and negative comments about their generation. So if you're baby boomer or Generation X saying, you weren't even born when this happened, or I'm old enough to be your mother, not helpful. Or when I was your age, blah, 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 like, not helpful. So deleting the negative attitude is extremely helpful. Increasing organizational openness. I know not everybody from baby boomers and Gen X are into it, but doing what you can to explain the why and help them learn. And I find that when I do this, I actually learn stuff because sometimes I hadn't thought about the why. And when I'm teaching someone else or helping them understand, it helps increase my own understanding. So this is a benefit for everybody here. Clarifying expectations and communicating feedback frequently. And not communicating feedback like, oh, why is this person so needy? Why do they need feedback? But communicating feedback with the perspective of, this person wants to improve. They want to know how they're doing. They want to get better. So I will share with them information as a boss or as someone who's their colleague in the workplace so that they can get better. And millennials want that. It actually improves work. It's a win-win for everybody, I think. So engaging your millennial and Gen Z team members to help craft the culture. So if you have the opportunity to do this, millennials and Gen Z are really good at doing this stuff, not just, planning a pizza party or something like that, but really they want to talk about what's not working well in the workplace. How can we do this better? Keep them focused on solutions, not just complaining, but keep it moving forward. And they'll have a lot of ideas. Just ask. They're happy to share. If you're a baby boomer or Gen X and you're working with millennials, you have millennials or Gen Z working for you, oversee teamwork. So they want to work in teams, great. And just check in, communicate, constant updates, make sure that they are producing whatever they need to do and that they're working on the timeline and that things are going fair. Nobody likes the whole middle school group project situation where one or two people are pulling all the weight and others are slacking. So just keep an eye on things. It's okay. They might not be comfortable bringing that up. That's a hard situation to deal with anyway. But if you're a boss or if you're in that position of authority, helping kind of make sure things are working fairly can go a long way. And then finally, providing millennials and Gen Z with opportunity to pursue their passions at work. Not every workplace you can make this happen. If you're an accountant and your passion is, I don't know, saving the whales, that's going to be a little hard to match. But talking with people about, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? What do you have in mind for the future? What are skills I can help you with while you're here so that you can move forward? And that also means acknowledging that they're not going to stay at this organization forever. None of us are going to stay at these organizations forever anymore. Those times are past. What can we do while you're here to both maximize the productivity and the work that you're doing and help you learn for the future? Yay, win-win. Okay, if you are a millennial or Gen Z, how do you talk with us? You talk with the Gen Zs and the baby boomers. So first, delete your negative attitude. No, okay, boomer, even though honestly, that is super funny. I think it's funny, but it's not helpful in the workplace. Not saying okay, boomer, or assuming they don't understand anything, or assuming they don't know how to program their phone or whatever. They might not, but making those assumptions is not helpful. And deleting negative comments about their generation, just, you notice this is for both groups. Just delete the negative attitude, not helpful. Ask them to teach you something. Gen Xers, baby boomers want to be helpful. They also want to, remember I said they really want people to defer to their opinions. So if you ask us to teach you something, then we feel like we know something and that we can be helpful. And that's really nice for us. And bonus, you get to learn something. So that's cool too. And I mentioned last time, one of the things, or I've mentioned in the past, one of the things that's really helpful for millennials and Gen Z that they don't tend to know a lot about, that baby boomers and baby boomers and Gen X do tend to know about, is politics. And I mean workplace politics, like what happened in this meeting and why is this happening and why did that person do that? That's stuff that those of us who have had more workplace experience have learned over time, and that we'd be happy to teach you, happy to share with you. So ask us to teach you whatever it is you want to know, and everybody's going to feel better. Repeating back expectations. Not proud, but baby boomers and Gen X often have assumptions about what millennials and Gen Z should know or what you already know. And so sometimes we tend to give, the older generations tend to give incomplete instructions or incomplete information. So make sure you repeat it back and understand, and so that you understand, and so that we're on the same page. And so if you're missing something that I may assume you know because I know it, so you should know it, I don't know, that happens, then you can clarify and make sure you get the guidance you need to be able to be successful. Pay attention to politics. I mentioned this is something that the older generations can teach younger generations, but there's a lot of politics going on. There's a whole game happening that once you see it, you can't unsee it. So paying attention to that and not assuming that it's a meritocracy, because it is not, or that if you just do what you need to do, it's all going to work out. That's just not how it works. That's, in my experience, that is not how things work. Sometimes that happens, and if so, fantastic. But politics often gets into play and messes with that a bit. So that's a place where you can pay attention and you can get some guidance from people who have been around the block a few times. Ask questions when you don't understand. Have difficult conversations. If things aren't working, ask to talk about them. The baby boomers or Gen X folks might not be open, or they might not be comfortable having those difficult conversations, but good on you for trying and keep going. And some of us do come around and we are able to have those conversations with you. And then, of course, good advice for any workplace and just the world in general. Don't take it personally. People may say negative things about your generation, and that's not about you personally. And that says much more about them than it does about you. And I hate to sound like your mom, but it's not about you. It's about them. And if people have some sort of issue with millennials, it's not about you personally. It's their problem. So you don't have to take it personally.